tuned in to another episode of the Talk About It podcast. I'm Lauren Fulmer.
I'm Victor Dantas.
And another special guest. We're going to spend a little bit of time here with Dusty Scott. Dusty, how are you?
Good. How are you guys doing?
Good. Yeah, life's good. Thanks for taking the time. I know you got a busy schedule, so to come give us an hour or so of your time, I appreciate that.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely.
So why don't you first just give a little introduction. Who is Dusty Scott?
Okay. I was born and raised in Galesburg. Went through all the way through high school, and then went to Carl Sandburg College for a year. Had to have a knee surgery. Didn't really know where I was going to go or what I was going to do. Applied to several colleges, and the only one that kept calling me back was Monmouth. So and I had a lot of friends going to Monmouth, and so I was lucky. I applied for an art scholarship there and got that, and ended up meeting my wife there. And once we finished up at Monmouth, went on to graduate school at Western in exercise science, and graduated there in 2006. Then my wife and I moved to, she got a job at University of Northern Iowa in Cedar Falls. Moved there, and I was a personal trainer and fitness instructor. Worked at several gyms and hospitals there, and then eventually kind of missing working with my hands. I grew up working in the family business, Danny Scott Builders and Sons, working construction, and also the arts and things like that. I decided to, let's move closer to home and be closer to family. And so we kind of had done that thing where we went, and somewhere else is always somewhere better. And then, eventually we decided, let's pack up and move back. And her family's from Canton and Peoria area, so it really worked out to be, closer. And we came back in 2009. First came back, thought it was a huge mistake after the first year, but then after about a year and a half, it's been the best decision we made. So yeah, it's been awesome.
That's cool.
Yeah.
One part of your life I had no idea about, physical trainer.
Like the wellness. Yeah.
Had no idea you went to Western and did that. So
yeah.
What is there something that piqued your interest in that direction?
Actually, I had so I played football in high school, and I had tore my ACL. I tore my ACL I think my sophomore year, and in order to rehab that and come back and play again, I had to obviously be in the gym a lot and things like that, and really that clicked for me big time at that time. And also my dad had brought some weights down, out of the attic kind of thing when I was younger. I've always been a smaller guy. Well, from junior high on, everybody started getting taller than me and bigger than me, and so I think, there was one of those things that in order to to keep up, weights were going to be my thing. And then when I had the injury, that really accelerated that and kind of changed my way of thinking. And I was able to rehab, come back and play again, only to tear my other ACL and then have to have another surgery. But I was able to, like I said, I've been 20 years out, and my knees are good and everything's good. But it really became more about weightlifting and exercising and wellness than it was even playing the sports anymore. So that was my drive at the time, to pursue a career that was interest to me, and obviously after doing that for 5 years, sometimes when you take something you love and you turn it into your work, you tend to lose a little bit of that, love for it. So I do it for me personally now, but I no longer personal train or work in that industry anymore.
So you basically had the same injury on one leg or knee, and then the other knee.
Yes.
So was it basically the same recovery process?
I would say the second time was faster because I was more aware of what needed to be done.
Your mind was right.
Yeah. Both were extremely difficult, mentally, and especially because, I actually going to Carl Sandburg College was a great experience for me. But it was really hard at the time because everybody was moving on to college and I was having to stay back, you hear all your friends, and especially at that time of life where everybody's moving away and they're doing things and they're telling you all the great things they're going to do. And I'm hanging out, and thinking, oh my God, but actually Sandburg was a great stepping stone for me in terms of not only academically, but just the way I was treated there was really well. So that was fantastic. And, so but when I went there, or when I had to have the second one, mentally it was harder but physically it was easier, like, because I knew what to expect, like from, when I say mental, the strain of like everybody moving on, that was difficult. But from a mental standpoint of knowing what was ahead of me, part was a little bit easier, and the physical part was easier because I knew what I needed to do to push myself. Like, I knew it was okay to be in pain when you're going through rehabilitation and things like that. But yeah.
In your soccer career, have you ever had a major injury that took you out, or had you?
No, I mean, I had an injury on my thigh. I opened my muscle like 2 centimeters, but like not externally, but internally. So my muscle opened completely. But I took like 6 months to get better, but it never got really good.
Yeah.
To this day, I'm still not 100%.
I stay away from certain things, like, every time I try to get in the squat rack and start squatting, like, I'm good for about 2 weeks, then all of a sudden some aches and pains, and not to be, a wimp about it or anything, but I just, like, I'm in to play the long game now, not the short game. So when whenever I just try to work harder, work smarter, not harder. Sure. And so there's just some of those things, like I don't do backyard sports anymore, any of that kind of stuff. I just steer clear of that, just keep that kind of stuff to the cardio. And then obviously what I do, working for the family business is physical in itself, but also, I had an injury not that long ago in my shoulder, and it started to affect my artwork. And I was like, I'm not messing around. I mean, so now I'm very conscientious about, how it is I do different things, and try to be mindful of, and we're not getting any younger, so it's good to stretch a little bit too.
So we're over 40,
right?
He's quite a bit younger, but yeah, I mean, you do something stupid like that. Like, I was playing basketball a couple months ago, came down on a guy's foot, and then for 2-3 weeks, I got a black and blue foot. I'm like hobbling around and going home and icing it, and I'm like, this is stupid. What am I even? It was fun. I mean, the day I was playing basketball, we were having a blast. I was actually the youngest one on the court, at 41.
Right.
These other guys. But it's just once something happens, you're like, man, we're not 18 or 20 where you bounce back real quick.
Sure.
So I don't know.
Well, and with my art career, I've always had people say, well, hey, that's great, because if something ever happened, you couldn't do certain things, you could always paint. And it's just like, well, when I had my shoulder injury, it hurt to paint. I mean, it hurt to hold a brush up, kind of thing. And that was like an eye opener for me too, and again, it's not to run scared or anything, but it's just to be mindful that, the things that you used to just walk over and just pick up because you had youth on your side. And if you got hurt, you would recover in a week. I mean, it took me 2 years to recover from my shoulder injury. So, I mean, that was a long time, and that was a mental game that was very difficult to play. And luckily I came out on top and everything worked out. But again, it's like everything we do, you learn from those things, and you think, okay, I got to do better. I got to be more mindful. That doesn't mean things won't still happen. I mean, like anything, just a simple walking off a curb and stepping the wrong way could do something. But I mean, I think it's if you start to take a look at certain things that you're doing in your life, and it's like, is this more reckless than it needs to be? You know what I mean? Is this, and also too, priorities are different for me too, like things that used to interest me now, painting and art. I mean, it's like my passion, absolute passion, and also being there for the family business, physically, being able to be there to help dad or my brother or whatever, that stuff is super important. So some of those things that, I used to love to go snow skiing, it's like, it's just not on the priority list anymore, Yeah.
So my daughter's 11, and that's all, she's super into wanting to go snow skiing every winter.
Right.
And I went with her last year, and I mean, I had a couple pretty good falls, and I'm, the whole time I'm like, please don't anything dumb happen to me.
Yeah.
But yeah.
How did the art thing started?
That's what I was gonna say. Let's transition to the
art.
Sure.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, like, I think as early as I can remember, there was always, the interest to like all kids, right? I mean, you draw or you do something with crayons, or there's something in that way. I remember when I was real early on, like, I had a couple of things that I got kind of some recognition for, like some detail, like I'd drawn a house and there was all kinds of extra detail things I added, and I was doing like those caricature heads, like where the heads were bigger than the bodies, and I got some recognition for that. And so it was always like something, interest. Also growing up in a household that didn't have a lot of art around or anything, I was able to caught PBS and watching Bob Ross and different things, it's like, and it just seemed magical to me. It almost seemed like how could you, how does this work? You're watching magic before, like somebody do a brush and all of a sudden it looks like a tree. It's like, holy cow. Right. And so there was always that kind of interest. But when I went to Monmouth, or when I had applied to the art scholarship, it was really kind of a fluke. I just didn't really, I heard they had an art scholarship. You didn't have to major. I didn't even know what I would do with art. I knew I didn't want to be a teacher, so I just thought, and then once I got the art scholarship, I thought, well, why not double major? I like art and whatever. And so went all the way through, graduated with honors in the art department, but also graduated from the physical education department, which was two weird things as a double major, but I had to do all my own advising because neither department knew anything about the other department. So I had to make sure I had all of that taken care of. But then, after that, I was primarily a welding sculptor when I was at Monmouth, and I only ever had 2 painting classes when I was there. But once I left Monmouth, I tried to go to, I took a welding class at Sandburg just to kind of use their facility, and they were fantastic about it. But, as you can imagine, logistically trying to move material and various things, and they're not really set up to be like an art studio. I mean, they're set up in a different way, but I mean, they were still kind enough to let me, use, I was there for a class, but they knew I wasn't there to be a structural welder or anything like that. But after a time, that just didn't work out. It was just, this is a mess. So we moved away, like I said, to Iowa, and when I was going to Monmouth, I would come back and help in the summers, being that I lived in Galesburg. And one time I came back and they got a shipment of a bunch of damaged product from Dick Blick. Dick Blick had donated. So they had, so I went there to help them kind of sort through and get things situated. And my pay, so to speak, was to pick something out, and so there was this broken Bob Ross easel. Ironically, it was a Bob Ross easel, and it was this little tabletop easel. And with my carpentry background, I was like, I can fix that. So I fixed it and kind of just toted it around with me like a blanket or something, that you travel around with, and didn't really know what I was going to do with it. And then we were living in Iowa, and I started doing these little tabletop paintings like these, and I started kind of accumulating them, and so basically it was born out of a desire to just want to make stuff, and which I've always kind of had. And then I had no real goals in mind about what it would become or anything like that. I just wanted to, but then as you can imagine, you accumulate and you've spent enough money, you think, well, maybe I should try to sell this stuff, or, so I'll do a street show. And so I started trying to do street shows, and I couldn't afford the whole canopy setup with all the really neat walls. So I devised a system of like interlocking those metal shelving units into a Z pattern for wind resistance. And then I went and bought discounted fabric at Walmart and pinned up with clothespins around there to create like a wall-like structure, and hung chains down, and then hung all my paintings on. And I wish I could tell you that led to unbelievable profits and things like that, but all of that just basically my game plan at that time was to have all those paintings set up, and I would normally work really hard on especially like one, and I would mark it down at like $100, and I was hoping that if I could just mentally, the game was at that time, if I could sell one painting for $100, somehow it magically justified all this time and all this money, taking the day off of work and all that. And I was always lucky. I always got to sell that one that kind of mentally, kept me motivated, because there was tons of years. There was probably 10 years where it was virtually crickets. The whole point, in hindsight, if you were to assess yourself, like in terms of like work to profit ratio or anything like that, it was huge failure. And and all that time, you're just like, what am I doing? But yet you still feel compelled to do stuff. And eventually, but again, I just had a little bit, I was working at a hospital, in their wellness center, and they knew that I did some art. So they commissioned me to do, a huge painting for their cafeteria. And I look back to what I did that for, which was for a song basically. But, it's all those little neat opportunities that just started to kind of, slowly but surely. And then, ironically, just as I started gaining traction in Cedar Falls, where I'd had, a couple of gallery pieces up and had sold some pieces and had things like that. We moved back to Galesburg, which you would think that, oh, you're moving back to your hometown. And it was like starting all over again, all over again. I would set up a street show. My family has always been a huge support, but they would come and they would almost stand in front of it like a blockade, because they were there to support me. But I'm like, I love you guys, but you got to part way, you got to I'm trying to show other people. I know you guys know what I do, but, I'm trying to show other people that I do this. Because, again, some people knew me for the fitness thing and not the art thing. Mm-hmm. And so, or whatever it would be. So you're trying to kind of introduce yourself and figuring out, And to be honest, the whole art thing has been born out of really not knowing what the heck I'm doing most of the time and just figuring it out, because, in hindsight, even back at Monmouth, there's some opportunities that I probably should have taken advantage of, that I should have educated myself more then, but really having no clue what I was going to do with it, never even thinking it was a viable option to be a profitable thing to actually make art and sell it. I just probably didn't utilize a lot of those opportunities I should have. So, it's been me playing catch up, for the last 20 years of being out of Monmouth, figuring things out. But I think there's a lot of benefit to that. I think it's great to get information from people and be somebody's protege. However, I think when you navigate your own world, you tend to do things sometimes untraditionally that other people aren't trying. Yeah. And they actually end up working, in a way that you run into people and they're like, well, you shouldn't do that. And it's like, well, I don't know. Why not? It's working. You know what I mean? Right. And then all of a sudden it does work. And then, hear what's happened in recent years. And again, I don't mean this to be cocky and arrogant because I still have so much to learn and whatever, but the idea that all of a sudden you start to get some people inquiring about, well, how are you doing this? Or what did you do? And it's just it's been interesting because it's like, I don't really have a manual of referring anybody or saying, well, so-and-so told me to do it like this. It's just really, I didn't know what the heck I was doing, but I need to solve this, solve a problem. Yeah, and so you just needed to figure it out. So, yeah.
Where do you have, do you have a website, or if someone wants to go look at some of your art that you've already done, maybe what's available for sale? I don't even know this. I talk to you all the time.
Right. So, DustyScottArt.com is my website, and there's a contact thing, that you can get in contact with me if you are interested in commissions. I don't really have a for sale section in that. However, some of that stuff, some pieces I do have. I'm busy enough that I can't really keep up with what's for sale, what's not for sale, and all that kind of deal. However, and a lot of my stuff that I do is commission based, so that's fantastic. I feel very fortunate for that. And then on Instagram, it's Dusty_Scott_paintings, and then in Facebook, it's Dusty Scott's paintings. And So I just now have a logo and I got a QR code and all this stuff, and we were discussing you really should have this uniformly all the same, right? That would be the wiser decision. However, it took me so much to get what I had to start all over and shut my Instagram down and do, and re-navigate all of that and the backlog of pictures and everything. It's in hindsight, I should have probably gone a little bit more professional route a few years back. But, it's working for me and everything. It's just, it's probably not the smartest decision from because as it is, it's hard for me to, like I said, in these instances. But luckily, it's been so much through word of mouth. And I have found that, on those different areas, whether it be website, Instagram, Facebook, just these different, whatever different avenue it is, there's people that niche hits anyway. So, having it be something that's, universal hasn't necessarily been a thing that I had to have had done, because most people that are in those communities just kind of tend to navigate towards those, and they're not doing all three of them. They're, in my experience, they're doing one, so they don't do social media, so they'll do your website, or they're just on Instagram and they don't have Facebook, or they, and Facebook and Instagram are tied together anyway, so you can, you're linking them back and forth. So
go ahead, Victor.
No, I was gonna ask. So, do you think your skills with painting, was it before school, or you think after you went to school, that you learned a lot in school, or it was already before you had those skills before?
I think, I think I think it's been, again, like at Monmouth, I only had 2 painting classes, so it was pretty much on welding. And obviously, we're not set up in a situation to show them, or examples or whatever. But if you do go to my website, or you do see, you'll see a lot of my stuff is kind of photorealism, but I also do several different styles and interests. So I would say that it's been born out of just me practicing independently more than it has been from an instructor, standpoint. That's not to discredit Monmouth or even the art classes that I took at Sandburg. They were fantastic. But what's been really cool about that is like me doing it independently. I'm not, there's some people you see their work and you know exactly who taught them because and I'm not criticizing that, but what it's been interesting is that I really haven't had somebody necessarily that I was trying to mimic or anything. I was just, there's all people you're trying to mimic, but I mean a wide variety rather than one individual.
If you would have fell,
that would have been like, and we're done. That's it.
Made the show. What are you doing down there?
Right.
No.
But yeah, so so I would say that it's been born out of like really practicing. It's not been anything. I just gave a presentation at a grade school, I think last year, and I brought some of my work from when I was 10 years old there, so I could show them. And then I brought a photorealistic painting that I did of my daughter, and I wanted to show them that the work that you're doing probably looks pretty close to the work that I was doing at this time. And so the idea that we all get encouraged and discouraged throughout life, whether you're a mechanic or whether you're a teacher or whatever your interest is in life. I mean, there's somebody that's came along and said you're either, there are 2 things I think sometimes. You either have an extreme passion for it or you get encouraged with it, or you have both or whatever. And for me, I was lucky that I did get some encouragement through that, but I also had a lot of passion. And I think that kind of persistence. And what happens, like we all started off almost drawing the same, and with the exceptions of people like Picasso and stuff that have unbelievable talents at very early ages. But most of us, all of our stuff looks the same. But somewhere along the line, somebody gets encouraged, somebody gets discouraged, and pretty soon, that herd gets thinned down. And
I still draw like I did when I was 4.
Yeah. But the funny thing is though is like
it hasn't changed.
Right? But what I think is so interesting and is a lot of I got recognition and I still get a lot of recognition for doing stuff that looks like realistic, However, what's unfortunate is that becomes our marker for a lot of people, especially like people that maybe haven't really studied art history or anything like that. It's like, well, if you're good, you can only do real looking stuff, and that's simply not true, because what's unique is like even the way that you do that, like you still draw the way you were, when you were younger, there's a unique, it's like people that are writers or musicians, you have a unique twist on how it is you're like tweaking things and how you're seeing things, like how your brain see things, and then how that goes through your hand to draw a picture, is probably pretty unique in itself. Even like little character things that you did in the side margins of your Mead notebook, like little whatever they are, they might be something that you did.
Ninja Turtles.
Right, mostly. Exactly. Your interpretation of Ninja Turtles, right? Yeah, so I mean, it's all that kind of stuff. And again, it's the encouragement, discouragement, and through that. And then whatever clicks with you and that you have that passion, but I think sometimes like to have something click, you do need a little bit of encouragement in the beginning, like somebody to say, hey, not that you can't circumvent that, but I mean, just the idea that if you do have a little bit of that encouragement, it's like, it's like, oh, okay, I'm going to invest a little bit more. And yeah. And I mean, there's some other things too. Like I look back, I'll never forget, like, I was talking to my wife about this a while back. When I was in 2nd grade, I was at Nielsen School, and they had an assembly, and it was awards assembly. It was just a cheesy kind of like, it was in the gymnasium. We're all, sitting cross-legged in the gym, and they're announcing, and all they have is like a laminated awards, pieces of paper. And I remember Amber Hammond, and I can't remember Amber's married name now, but she was a friend of mine, and she just killed it on the awards. I mean, killed it. She was getting called up like every single time. And in gym class, she won the pull-ups. Like she did the most pull-ups. I'm like, I want to get the most pull-ups. And then I was like, not. I
want to be like Amber Hammond.
Yeah, exactly, right? I want to get these awards. And what's weird is at that point in my life, it wasn't about being competitive with her or being competitive with anybody else, but there started to be like a niche of self-competitive nature. It really, and so even in art now, like I don't look at myself as being competitive like with other artists. Like I'm not trying to compete with them. I'm competing with myself all the time. Like what can I do? What can I ratchet it up? How can I push that, and so that competitive nature and the competitive nature to practice, I think really became, how can I do this? Okay, so I've been doing this for a while. What else can I do? And that's been, and I just link it back to that moment. And back then, the next year, I was able to I still have my laminated paper awards in some folder somewhere. But the next year, third grade, I was getting called up for awards and stuff. And I was like, and so I remember, but again, it wasn't to compete with other kids as much as it was that
self-gratification.
Yes, I wanted to, and I think I've translated that into the art, like that drive and desire to want to keep that, intensity going.
So one thing I've always wondered with art, I was on the board of the Galesburg Civic Arts Center, which was really my first introduction, if you will, to art galleries and all this. When they even asked me to be on the board, I had no idea. I'm like, why? I don't even know how to draw. And they're like, well, that's the whole point.
Exactly.
We have at the time, like we have a bunch of artists. We need people who are looking for involvement in the community.
Right.
Maybe a little financial background, whatever. Like we have enough artists. We don't need that.
Right.
So, but one thing, I would go through these art galleries and I would, and no offense, but I mean, I would look at some of these paintings and I'd be like, $480? Like, what? Who is it? Who's going to buy that? Well, clearly there are people.
Sure.
But not only that, how does one determine like what the price is on, typically you can say, okay, well, I have, this material to buy this cost me this much. And then, so I assume there's a time, consideration, like it took me X amount of hours to do this. How is some of that price point figured out for?
Sure. So like, okay, let's take it for instance locally. Like, so for instance, if you are going to go with a gallery locally, I mean, they actually take a small percentage compared to other galleries, but they do take 30%. So of that, let's say it's $400. So I mean, they're taking 120 out of your 400. Which, I mean, they got to keep lights on, doors open, things like that. So that contributes. And not only that, they tend to not make a ton of money off a lot of that stuff. I mean, in terms of, because they're also, they're paying for food for the show, and there's promotion and PR and all those kinds of things. But anyway, so, there's the 30% plus, depending on how you buy your art materials and depending on what art materials you're purchasing, like if you're buying golden paints or if you're buying discounted materials, I mean, there's cost saving measures that you can do, and I've gotten pretty good at. However, if you're paying full blown retail for art materials, I mean, you're going to have, so for instance, in that, let's just even it to the 400. Okay. So say there's 400. So then you got 120 off the top, for the gallery. Okay. And then all of a sudden, say you got, say you got another 120 in material because the canvas and the art material that you bought, and then your time to go get the canvas, or you maybe need to pre-order it or whatever you need to do. So then you go buy that. If you stretch the canvas on yourself, or if you pre-primered it, or if you bought a pre-made, pre-stretch, whatever the situation is like, so say it was another 100 or $120. So then that's 240 out of your 400. Okay. So then all of a sudden, 240 so that leaves you with something like 160. So then you got 160. So then if it took you over a day to paint that painting, okay, say it took you a week to paint that painting, so then you got a 40-hour work week, or maybe not technically 40, but let's just say for 40. So then take $160 and you divide that by 40, and then what are you getting paid an hour? I mean, there's not that,
$4.
right? It's not much, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, I think there's that. I think there's also the idea, like, I mean, why do we pay, many other people to do what they do? Because of their experience and because of their delivery. Like if you're a consistent person that can deliver on a regular basis, and you tend to be a person that is, so if somebody buys something and say they want to look at it as an investment, in the sense that you might have a name of a following, and it might be somebody that you say, hey, I like to collect so-and-so, and so-and-so, produces on a regular, same difference that like, we pay doctors for their knowledge, we pay other people for their knowledge. The better you do at your craft or your interest, mechanic, whatever it may be, you tend to kind of after you've been in the game long enough, that you tend to, a certain obtainable value becomes out of what it is your knowledge is and the work. And then also too, a lot of it is like, you're appealing to different people that have different interests, So if you're, for instance, like Jackson Pollock, I don't care for him as he was as a person, but his story really fascinates me. And I could talk about that for a long time, so I'm not going to get into all of that. However, some people just see his work and just say, well, this is simple spatter painting, kind of drip paintings or whatever. But the thing is that, but if you are connected to his work because you know the history of like what was going on in art history at the time, the fact that, abstract expressional artwork put America on the map in terms of, before that it was very, everything was very European type. I mean, and it was only during World War II that when all of a sudden Nazis were trying to basically dictate what art could be done, and they were, throwing people that were, anything that they were doing that wasn't like realism representation or anything like that, they were destroying their work or whatever. Then it became like, come to America, drips and paintings, do your thing, like have this freedom to do wild stuff. I mean, just wild thinking. And a lot of that we take for granted now because it's been with us for such a long time. So we see things and we're like, we can be really dismissive about that stuff. But you got to think, when you were the first people that were the first ones to say, hey, instead of doing this, I'm going to do this. And there's an aesthetic appeal. And some people, it'll never have the appeal. But again, when you know the history and you know different things, and so when you go into a gallery and you see different kinds of work, it's not supposed to be for everybody. I mean, obviously, certain kinds of work are going to appeal to more people. So therefore you might get a better chance at selling or whatever. But, it's okay to not, you're not you're not a stupid person for not knowing or appreciating what's on the wall. It's just different tastes and different interests. For me personally, though, I try to take some of the aristocratic kind of element out of the art and make art really accessible for a lot of different people. So that's why, like, I have such a wide range of things that I do. That I do stuff that, yes, it can cost a lot of money. And then I also, if somebody's making minimum wage and they want a portrait or they want something of somebody, like, we'll work together. You may see a certain style you like of mine, and that might be a little too expensive, but we'll figure something out, because I don't want to just to appeal to like big ticket items. Like I want to make art accessible for all kinds of people, and I want it to be, so if somebody, is making minimum wage and their grandmother passed away and they want a painting of their grandma, like their grandma deserves, art shouldn't just be for somebody that can afford to have like over the fireplace mantle some, like person in a, an evening dress with, pearls on or whatever. It's to me it's different than that.
And I know it's not all about the money, first of all, and you've shown that through your generosity of donating many paintings.
Raised over 40,000 for local charities through donations.
So that's another thing that's real dope.
That's crazy.
He'll like do I've been at one where I know one piece went for $5,000.
Yeah.
I remember watching the bid going back and forth. I believe it was the Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah, at the summer soiree.
It was the Galesburg Civic Arts Center summer soiree. Yeah, and it was pardon my French, but badass Abraham Lincoln portrait. It was bad.
Thanks.
That was pretty sick.
Thanks.
And it went for like $5,000. You know, and I'm like, God, it was amazing.
Oh, thanks.
And so, is that the highest ticket that you've seen one of your own pieces go for?
That's the highest. Well,
and that was for a charity.
Yes,
that was a fundraiser.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in terms of like on a, so the interesting thing has been like throughout the course of this journey, is that I've had some of these like those really wow moments, right? And let me just backtrack a little bit to lead up to that. One was I got an opportunity to President Wyatt at Clarence Wyatt at Monmouth College reached out to me, or he didn't independently, but his secretary reached out to me about having a meeting about me doing his portrait for the Hall of Portraits, which we might work through that. so this has been years ago. But anyway, he reached out the college, and so while I was there and having a conversation with him and his wife Lobi, we. As I was leaving, I pitched him an idea, and I said, "Hey, I'd like to." And I'm kind of probably making my own rendition of this, but anyway, I said I have some other ideas I'd like to do for the college, and I think I'm going to speak for him a little bit, that maybe appreciated my kind of tenacity of wanting to say, "Hey, while I'm here, I got some other ideas," and so they gave me an opportunity to pitch some more ideas. So I came back and I did this pitch, and he wasn't in the meeting, and Lobi was, and Coach Haynes and Stacy Lotes, and so I give the pitch, and then all of a sudden they call President Wyatt in, and so I had to give the pitch again, and lo and behold, I end up getting this gig. So I got this gig, and now I have multiple paintings that are permanently on display at Monmouth College. My point of bringing all that up is that when I left that day, I thought, is this the coolest thing? I mean, my whole thing was I put a ton of work into it, and I thought, when I go home, I'm going to take a nap, because I never take naps, because I just don't have the time, and that's just not something I do. And I thought, I'm going to go home, and my rewards, I'm going to take a nap. So we went, my brother and my dad helped me set them up. We went out to lunch. I came back. I sat for an hour, just watched students interact with them, because it was like all of a sudden they were up. Then I went home, and then all of a sudden when I was on my way home, I had this like empty feeling in my stomach, so to speak, that what if that's the coolest thing that is ever going to happen with my art career? Like, what if that's it? And so when I went home, like, instead of taking a nap, I just started painting again, because I thought, I don't want that to be the last thing. Right. Like, I care more about that not being the llast thing than I do about taking naps. Fast forward, I had an opportunity, there was a Benton Davis charity. Benton Davis was a little boy that had cancer. Luckily, he's recovered, and but at the time, I reached out to his family, and this is, I'm not quite sure where the timeline is with this, but I had donated, or I reached out to his family and said, hey, I know his dad, I knew his dad for years, and I said, I'd like to donate. So I donated a painting in that deal, and it sold for $4,000, like $4,500 or $4,200, I don't know, something. And what was interesting, some of my family was there. My dad was actually there. I think it was my dad had always been a supporter, but I think that was like a moment where it was like, holy crap. Like, I think it was a holy crap moment for a lot of people, where it's like, this is something, But again, I left that moment and thought, is that the coolest thing that's ever, I had a piece, when am I going to ever sell anything for more than $4,500 or $4,200? So then, you fast forward, then I had couple things happen, like where I did some other charity things, sold something for $1,000, $2,000, whatever. And then that night happened and went for, $5,000, and it was like, and again, like after that, there's that pit of your stomach where it's like, this can't be the last thing. So from a donation standpoint, that's been the highest on the 5,000, collected, or one individual sale, like I said, combined has been around 40,000. However, privately, I've been able to exceed, that marker. But mind you, the work has been excessive in certain capacities of that. But yeah, so, but on other individual projects, I've been able to exceed that number. But they've been on much larger projects and things like that.
So there are some paintings that are like $1 million, 500,000.
Right.
How hard is to copy and fake one and painting exactly like those?
Well, to actually copy and fake it, you would have to. So for instance, like if you were to fake a Rembrandt or whatever, like those kinds of paints that were made at that time have like certain. The painting materials that they were like painting on. People know these paintings, and then also when galleries do photos of paintings, they photo them without the frames, so they'll like. I'm not an expert in this, but I just know a little bit about some of this. But like they'll photo them without the frames on them, so like you see parts that nobody else gets to see in the backs of them. So it's you could I could mimic, like I did a painting of a Van Gogh that looks, it could be hanging in a museum, and if you were not I don't mean this to be boastful, but I mean, and it's because it's my wife's favorite artist, and at the time I tried to order a print. Well, he did, it's Bedroom at Arliss, and he did one in early September and did one in late September. Well, all the prints I kept ordering were the other one, which is a darker one, so I just painted her a lighter one. So, I mean, you can mimic something like that, and I mimicked it for her. However, like, I couldn't, I mean, nobody would believe it if it was, right. I mean, and then what are the odds that you're going to all of a sudden that's magically going to be in your hands, and somehow it's just never been recorded? I mean, rare instances does something surface like that, but it pretty much, so much has been documented.
Yeah, that's another thing that I wonder. I've seen on the news that some people steal arts from art galleries or museums. Why would they steal if everybody that would potentially buy that from them would know that you stole from somewhere, because there's only one? Yeah. So people would steal just to live at their house and that's it, or try to sell to someone that's willing to. Yeah.
Well, and even if you have it, you can't show anyone.
Yes,
right.
They know
that's my point.
You know, I think depending on who's going to have an interest. I mean, maybe they would have try to do some kind of ransom situation or something, but also. People that might dabble in that might be people that are really powerful people, and they don't really need to show anybody anything. They just, like, they could have a vaulted room that they just go in and sit and stare at the painting that they obtain, like a Thomas Crown Affair kind of. I don't know if you ever saw that movie. Yeah, so I mean, I don't really,
That's crazy.
Have you seen that movie?
No.
You should watch it.
Yeah, it's probably in the 90s or early 2000s.
What's the dude's
name? Pierce Brosnan.
Pierce Brosnan.
Yeah. So I don't.
Great movie, though.
Yeah, I would say in terms of a painting's not something that you can melt down and reform into a new thing. So, I don't quite I mean, I think probably years ago it was maybe something when you could do something like that. And there was a guy that was actually selling fakes. There's like everything anymore, there's a Netflix documentary or whatever, and he would do these crazy fakes, and he would actually stain like wood panels with coffee and stuff to make them look older, and he would go in dressed as like I think he dressed like a priest, or he'd dress and say like he had obtained something, and if I remember correctly, he would seek out something really obscure, like a painting where there was minimal documentation of, and in which case, and he would pass it off as, but he was so good at doing that they actually, and he was duping like all these like museums left and right, but he just, and so I think they actually collected his body of work, from that, and actually had a showing of all his, so I don't remember what all happened with him, but he never got sent to prison because he never took any money for the donations, if I remember correctly. So him duping them was one thing, but they never.
He really duped them on the legal side.
Yeah, because he never even. So he just got those works in those galleries. But again, somebody watching this or listening to this will probably maybe have a better recollection of what that was. But yeah, it was kind of interesting.
Let's talk about people can make requests.
Sure.
I know personally I've had some friends have sent, whether it's an old picture, a dog,
right?
Anything like that. Why don't you hit on that, kind of what people can do if they're interested in having something like that done?
Yeah.
And then also, what's the craziest request you've ever had? Crazy. Like any nudes or anything, like nothing.
I had one person joke with me that they wanted something like that done of their significant other, and that didn't. I think it was more of a joke, but it was also kind of like, we're probably not. Yeah, we're not gonna probably do that. But we aren't going to do that. But it was as far as people reaching out in regards to. Paintings, I paint pretty much almost anything. The only thing I tell people is I don't paint hate. So anything that can be interpreted as hate, whether that's the intent or not,
right?
I won't do anything like that. But as far as almost anything else, I painted motorcycles and dogs and cats and and babies and.
Sports.
Adults and sports, and I pretty much I look at it all as like a challenge of like being able to take I paint oil and acrylic, but predominantly acrylic, taking those tools and those materials and seeing what, so, I really, a lot of times people will have niches that they do, like they just kind of do this thing. And I learned early on from my dad, like working construction, is that if you just want to be a framing carpenter or you just want to be a finish carpenter, then when that finished work is gone and you don't know how to pour concrete and you don't know how to build decks and you don't know how to do rough frame, you don't know how to do drywall, you don't know how to do any of these things, then you're going to limit your work drastically. But if you know how to do a lot of those things, even if you're stronger in some areas, other areas than you are in others, the more diversified that you allow yourself to be, the more steady your work will be over a long time. And a credit to him, he's been in construction for over 40 years in his own business. So I think I apply that same principle, to artwork, in the sense that what I like to do is, like, if somebody reaches out to something that I've never painted before, I'll say, okay, here's something maybe like similar. I'll draw a connection, so if it's a building or if it's something, I'll say, hey, take a look at this work, and if you like my style, then I'll absolutely, or if you have another artist kind of style, I'd be willing to try it out and see, not to copy that other artist's work, but just to say, like, oh, can you do it with this kind of brush stroke or something like that? And it's like, yeah, I'll give it a shot. But just being straight up with people, I think just being honest with people. I think I've heard you say in one of the other podcasts that, you treat people like your family, so when somebody reaches out to me because they have a memorial portrait or they lost a pet, like Autumn, my wife and I lost like our dog Baxter a couple years ago, and oh my God, I mean, it crushed me, crushed her too. And so, like, when people reach out, like, regardless of whether I get the job or not, like, the compassion point of talking to them, saying, like, not just like, oh, boom, pet portraits are X amount of dollars, whatever. It's like, hey, I'm really sorry that this is happening, and it's an honor that you reach out to me, even if I don't get the job. Like, the fact that you thought enough of my work or whatever, that you reached out, So, I think treating people like I said, like their family, or in a human quality to that, to where you just don't keep it so, business all the time. Mm-hmm. And then, so yeah, I mean, in terms of like what people reach out to, like, I pretty much will do just about anything. I mean, as far as in that regard. And as far as strange paintings, nothing crazy. I did have something interesting here not that long ago. And I believe it'd be, I'm not going to share names, but Sure. It was a mutual friend of ours, I believe. And she had reached out, and her aunt was terminally ill on hospice, and she could no longer go home. And what she wanted to do was sit in her backyard. And so my friend sent me pictures of her backyard, like all her, like, kind of yard ornament stuff or whatever. And her backyard, not criticizing, but it wasn't looking over a lake. It wasn't, I mean, you'd look out and there was some kind of industrial buildings in the far distance, and there was telephone poles, and there was like, but it was her little oasis, mm-hmm. like where this was. And she had her yard ornaments that had, and my friend told me about where those came from, who they were from. And it was a patio that was like, it was probably, I'm guessing, maybe 10 foot by 15 foot concrete slab. And this is what the patio was, and the viewpoint was I did it as a point perspective, and I painted all these things in it and made it. And then, like, again, the backyard was nothing crazy, but it was a painting that would have been hard to get a photo of, to encapsulate all that was, or to encompass all that was there. So I think that was the reach out of the painting, is like, can you get this all to fit in here? And so I did this, and well, first the timeline, I did not have time to do this, and oh man, he got to working on me. So I was like, okay. So I called her back, and I was like, look, let's do this. Like, if I got to take off work, I'll take off work, but time is of the essence. And I can't always do those kinds of things, but I do try if I'm able to, because just out of the human compassion factor. And again, the honor that somebody's reaching out that thinks enough of what I do to have something like this. So anyway, I was able to knock it out in a short amount of time, and luckily it was able to be delivered to her. And over the course of, unfortunately, she has since then passed away, but she did get the painting several weeks before she passed. And my friend had texted me and told me how all the people that were like coming to her in hospice care, she was telling them how, her niece had a friend of hers paint this, and this was her. And it was just like, oh my God, it was just so, and all of those kinds of things are a huge honor to do, you know, but what was so unique about this one is most of the time those honors are like honoring somebody. So you do a painting of somebody, and this was just a simple backyard. It was a very simple, clean, neat backyard, but it was nothing extravagant. And this was somebody's like oasis. This was their paradise, and they could no longer. So part of what started working on me is like me sitting in my studio with my daughter right in the next room, maybe hearing my wife in the other room. That's my perfect place. And the idea that someday I'll go there and I won't be able to go back, or if I was told that I couldn't go back, I mean, and so to be able to provide that was just, of all the rewards that I've gotten in terms of, financial or whatever, I mean, those kinds of things, it's like, what a unique opportunity to be able to do that for somebody. It's unbelievable, right. And so, I mean, that probably maybe took a different angle than what you're reaching for, but
that's cool though.
But I mean, it was.
Have you
crazy.
thought about selling that type of art online, where people would be able to upload a photo of someone? You would the person would choose the sizes of pictures that they would want, and then you would draw and ship it to them, because I think there's a market on that, especially people that passed away. Yeah,
I think the trouble comes, the trouble and the challenge comes is that, like for instance for me, like I'm a one-man operation, so when I've just recently hired a private shipping company to ship some really large works that can't be shipped UPS. Okay. But I build my own crates. I calculate my own shipping. I'm giving my own quotes. I'm buying my own materials. I'm, doing the whole thing, which is fantastic. But you expend a ton of energy in that way, and so. What's always a struggle for me, because I always hate to turn things down, and that's really, really hard for me to do, especially after having so many years where you were just like, oh, please, anybody, like I'll paint anything, just whatever. So, I mean, when you get to the point, so I 100% agree. I think the hardest thing is, and one thing that I delayed getting a website for such a long time is that, I've been fortunate enough that Facebook in itself was enough to keep up with. And then you compound, like Instagram, and then just word of mouth and inquiries, and then now a website. And I mean, it's, and like all of us, I mean, you got your Instagram, you got your Messenger, I have 2 emails, and, you got text messages, and you got voicemail. I mean, you got 6 different avenues. Plus, I work another full-time job, and then this has became a full-time job, and I'm trying to be the best dad I can, and best husband I can. And it's a trick. I mean, and a lot of people, and again, not to be boastful, but they say, well, how do you do all this stuff? And it's like, the desire to do these kinds of things doesn't come easy. Like, I mean, it's getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning to do something on a painting, so it'll be ready, so that way I can still be around for when my daughter gets up, and then I'm not interrupting that time or whatever. And it's, it's eliminating cable, and it's eliminating all other distractions. It inhibits your social life and various things. I mean, sometimes I think when you're driven to do certain things, I mean, what people don't see is the sacrifices that you make in order to do those kinds of things. And again, there's plenty of people making tons of sacrifice out there that aren't getting any kind of the recognition or various other things. So I'm not trying to sound like I'm extraordinary in that respect by no means, but I'm just saying that it's some people think certain things are easy, and it's like, none of this is been easy. I mean, and there's a lot of years that there was no recognition, and there was no, none of that kind of thing. But so yeah, I mean, to go back to your question, I think it's just a little tricky. The more you open yourself up, because there, I had thought about that, about doing, memorial portraits. I thought about doing veterans portraits, but so all of a sudden, if I get 100 inquiries, it's like, how long am I? I mean, hypothetically, not to mention to give 100 quotes, and then to try to get deposits, and try to get, and most stuff that local, I try to keep it pretty relaxed. Most of the time, if it's somebody I know, or I know through somebody, a lot of times I'll be, won't worry too much about a deposit. I'll only do a material deposit. But you extend it beyond, like, the local situations, then I have to require a deposit, and then and then once people pay you money, sometimes then they're like, so when is this happening? When is this happening? Even if you tell them it's like, it's going to be 3 months, months, it's like a month and a half goes by and they're like, so where are we at? It's like, we're not there yet, right. Kind of thing. So yeah. No, I mean, I understand. I mean, people are excited and I'm glad they're excited, but it's a weird thing to navigate. And then when you're on your own business, people don't have to subscribe to this, but I mean, even when I've had bad interactions, which luckily have been few and far between, but there's a couple times I've been stiffed on paintings and things like that. I don't turn to Facebook and social media to air that out. Yeah. I'm not, anybody that chooses to do that, to each their own, in that respect. But, there's moments like that you kind of just have to say, okay, as frustrating as it is, as much as you want to tell the world, like what just happened, a lot of people are getting a lot of raw deals all the time and nobody really needs to hear about that. And also too, it's the few bad apples that spoil a bunch in that respect. So there's too many good interactions that I have to inundate, social media with my woes.
It's just wasting time and energy.
Yeah. Well, and also too, I think it's one of those things where for me personally, I want people's interaction with me and my business to be, a positive one, even if they don't hire me. Like that's okay. Like there's no harm in asking a question, an inquiry. There's no foolish, thing like that. I mean, the only thing that gets a little disheartening is if we're moving forward on this, you don't have to, like until we're committed. And most of the time I reach out, give a message or phone call before I get ready to start and say, hey, we're still a go, just to make sure there's no change of feelings or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, I want to keep it relaxed. I want to keep it enjoyable and fun. And I want people to be equally as excited to get the painting as I am to do it. And so I want to keep that good relationship. And then, if you're in business and you're not trying to create a relationship that's going to be a sustainable one for an over, and not adding a humanistic quality to your interaction, and trying to be robotic about it. I mean, I don't know what the statistics are, but I mean, for the energy that it takes to get a new client, compared to holding on to an older one, that's just common sense, as far as that goes. And it's just, I think in my nature to try to, I want to have pleasant interactions. I don't want to waste time with a lot of negative, negative things like that. So, yeah.
Well, good, man.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're how we're doing on time, or if you want to throw
I just had one last thing. You mentioned he did the La Cantinita wall. Is that?
So I did that with Joshua. Let me be clear so they have several paintings in their business that I've done independently. Okay. But Joshua Dixon and I,
Dixon's super talented graphic designer, right?
Yes, and he's also a painter too. But he and I have I think it's rare in the art world that you can find two people that can work together, but he and I are not only good friends, but we work well together. And when it comes to the kind of the mural stuff, we've kind of got an understanding that we kind of stay in our lanes. That doesn't mean that I can't do the digital stuff that he can do, but obviously I could design something or whatever. And it's not that he can't do painting, I mean, because he's a great painter too, but the idea that we kind of, when it comes to working together on that, we got an understanding too that we could also work independently if it's a situation that, we're to call, but we also, are good enough friends that we're not going to compete against one another. So if we have a situation that somebody's reaching out to one of us and reaching out to the other, we just got a pact that we'll call each other up and we work together and whatever. And if something happens, we got a smaller gig or something where it just doesn't call for the services of the other one, where that doesn't really work in, then there's no hard feelings there. But our biggest thing is to not compete with one another. And when we do work together, it's a great time. I mean, he can do what he does and we just kind of price that out in our own way. He gets paid what he needs to get paid. I get paid what I need to get paid. And there's nobody that's dominating that situation or anything in regards to making anything off the other one. But but yes, I did actually I did the painting and the construction, and he did the initial design. And the other great thing with him too is that he values enough of what I do that while I'm painting something, if I need to make tweaks or I need to make adjustments because something's not right, something doesn't feel right, like in the Cherry Street piece that we have coming up, and I won't disclose what that's going to be, so it'll be a nice surprise, but there was some voids in the painting that I appreciate that he left there, so he didn't overly do something to where like it made my job like insane.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
But then once I got a handle on the overall construction of it, you know, because with my building background and the way we do the murals, like normally I build them and construct them and do all that kind of stuff, and obviously I do the painting, but that's out of a mutual understanding between he and I. But when I did that, I was able to take some voids that were in the painting and kind of inject some of my own things in there, and he's great with that. And if I need to change a color or do something, you know, if it was something like major, I would consult him out of respect. But I mean, we just have such a mutual respect, and I think that's also unique in the art world too, because it can be a really kind of a lonely sounds so cheesy, but I mean, it can be a world that like can be really cliquey sometimes, and it can also be, you know, to where, you know, you're trying to make it and you're trying to figure out how to do something, and you ask people and they're like, well, I don't know, you figure it out, you know, because like I had to pay my dues, you know, whatever. And so that could be, and I'm not saying, and you run onto some fantastic people like Chris Dakalasa, I mean, Stacy Lotes, I mean, there's Janice Mars, you know, there's just some fantastic, you know, there's wonderful people, but there are also people that are kind of a little bit more closed mouth, or they're kind of a little bit more standoffish, and so when you run onto somebody like Dixon and you're able to kind of work that situation out, I think it's really unique, and it's a great opportunity. I mean, it's been great for both of us, not to speak for him. I mean, it's been great for me, and he and I just, in, you know, a great friendship has blossomed out of it, which has been fantastic. So
that's
yeah,
good, man.
Yeah, but the other paintings in La Cantonita, like I did one of Frida, I did Pancho Villa, I did several that are actually hanging in their bathrooms that you know, that are in there.
When it comes to that, in that specific project, does the owner of La Cantinita tells you what her mind, like what she's thinking, or you just use your creativity and she trusts you to do whatever you want to?
You know, she actually a little bit of both. I mean, as far as, you know, Elvie and Justin, it was mainly Elvie was, you know, Justin, I think, had more involvement with Pancho Villa because all the paintings I were doing of women, and I think he was like, we need to get at least one dude in here somewhere, or whatever, you know, kind of thing. So, but as far as, but they gave me the freedom to paint, like, well, actually, the interesting thing is with Frida Kahlo, the Frida piece in there, there's an action style painting that I really like to do, and I normally don't do cold calls. I only do them once in a great while, and that's if I just have it in my head that I think, man, I think there's somebody that I think this person would maybe like this painting, and I want to find it a good home. And so I'd done this artist women's series that I had done because I realized that I didn't know that many women artists, like even despite having had an art degree, like there wasn't that many that were taught that much. So I'd done this series, and Frida, I did this painting of Frida in this action style. And so I'm thinking, like, what am I gonna, you know, like, I want to find this a home, and I knew Elvie was, you know, coming up with La Cantonita, and so I reached out and just cold called and was like, look, I know we knew each other a little bit from the gym, like when her and Justin used to go. I knew Justin from way back, you know, bar days kind of thing. I've run into each other, but with Elvie, I'd just known her from running into her at the gym and stuff at the time where we all used to go to the Y. I still do, but I just reached out and I said, hey, I know this is crazy, you know, no hard feelings if you're not into this. And ironically, she had just ordered a print of Frida, and she's like, no, I want the painting. And so we worked out a deal, and then after that, then it was like, then she reached out for another and another and another, and awesome. And that was fantastic. And then Dixon and I had the opportunity to do, you know, and then she reached out to both of us to actually, you know, credit her to starting that collaboration process between Dixon and I. And so we came to an early understanding of how we would, because my biggest thing is not that Dixon isn't capable of painting or that I'm able to design, but to me, like, I think the benefit is to having one person do mainly the one thing and the other person do the other. Is to have two people paint on one project, then you got, you know, you want things to look cohesive. So you want his design not to be interrupted by the things I'm trying to do in there, and nor, you know, whoever's painting it to have two different styles of painting, even though you're trying to do the same thing, you know. And but anyway, so she had reached out to those kinds of things. So it was a little give and take on both. And then I've had some other people reach out that have had specific, very specific ideas of what they want. But generally, like when it comes to businesses, they'll kind of give me a general, and then after that I can kind of take it from there, and or we kind of look at the different kinds of work that I do and say, I kind of like this kind of style, and can you do this? And yeah, so good. Yeah, crazy fortunate to have had the opportunity. It's like 500 paintings shipped to 27 states. It's painting in Tulum, Mexico. I had one that went over to a U.S. embassy for a while, and just now I was also involved in illustrating a children's book, the Silas the Great House Cat, who Janet Pogtol had written, and that I've just gotten stats here recently that's been shipped to like Poland, Australia, all these other kinds of things. So to think like these. And my daughter and my wife actually got to be 2 models that were posed in that book, which was unique. And I got to hide my daughter's name in it 3 times. And so and my background history, I go into Monmouth College, that's all in that book. And so in a little bio, and to think that that's being shipped all the way around is just, it's crazy. I mean, it's crazy. And this all started with a broken Bob Ross easel, like thinking like, what am I doing? Kind of thing, like, yeah. So,
hard work pays off.
I feel real lucky, super lucky. And I totally appreciate all of anybody that's ever even inquired about painting, even if they haven't, of course you appreciate the ones that have followed through, but just, it's everybody that's helped make this happen for me. I mean, in terms of like to make this thing that generates something, it's all that kind of support. And, being recognized for trying to give back, with the charity stuff. And I can't do that as much as what I used to do, but especially being a dad now. But, all of that kind of support, family support, I just feel so, so lucky. And I just want to continue to serve in many of those ways to try to give back in that capacity, because what I've been able to experience is I think very rare, especially for small communities and things like that. And so I don't want it to go away, and I hope it never does.
I don't think it will, man.
I hope not.
You've done a great job, and I will speak for the charities and all the people. I know that your work is very much appreciated, especially when it helps out a great cause. But even just having the art in the community and these businesses and in these households, it's something to be proud of, man. I keep up all your hard work. Thanks. I have no question, no doubt that you will.
Yeah, very good stuff.
Yeah,
thanks.
And look forward to seeing you continue to grow. Keep it up, man.
I appreciate it. it. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate being here and having the opportunity to tell a little bit about that.
Dusty Scott Art.
Yeah.
Is
.com. Yep.
DustyScottArt.com.
We'll put in the description.
Yeah.
So you'll be able to see the link in the description.
So,
awesome.
I'm going to do this for you. The Talk About It podcast. All right, guys. Thank you for tuning in to another great episode with Dusty Scott. I'm Lauren Fulmer and Victor Dantas. And appreciate it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the show. And we'll keep putting out episodes each week. Thank you.
See you next week.
Thank you for watching this episode of the Talk About It podcast.
I'm Victor Dantas.
I'm Lauren Fulmer.
And we would encourage you guys to subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to hit the bell. It's going to be right below the video. So
hit the bell.
So you know when the next episode is up.
We appreciate all the support.
Thank you.